City Talks with Reuben Abati.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of your number one talk show, City Talks with Reuben Abati, on your number one lifestyle station, City 1051 FM. On this show, we talk about stories of political and human interest, as well as issues that affect us as citizens of Nigeria and as members of a common human community. Today, we'll be discussing the attack on the U.S. Capitol, Trump's impeachment, and the aftermath. And to guide us through this, we have a very special guest in the house. It is with great pleasure to announce the presence on this program today of Professor David Aworawo, a professor of international relations and strategic studies. David Aworawo was born on the 5th of October 1968. He's a specialist in strategic studies, international relations, political history, and development studies. He has published widely in the areas of African politics and international relations. He attended the University of Lagos, where he earned his BA, MA, and PhD degrees in history in 1991, 1993, and 2001, respectively. For his doctoral thesis titled Diplomacy and the Development of Equatorial Guinea, 1900 to 1990, Aworawo earned the Nigerian University's Doctoral Thesis Award in December 2003. As an undergraduate student, David Aworawo distinguished himself, winning several awards from his sophomore years, including University of Lagos Scholarship for the Best Student in 1989, 1990, and 1991. Upon graduation in 1992, he also won the Professor Gabriel Lusanya Prize for the Best Graduating Student in History and the Chief Ayoroshiji Prize for the Best Project in History. Shortly after completing his doctoral program, David Aworawo began his teaching career as a lecturer at the then newly established Department of International Relations at the Igbinedion University, Okada, Edo State. The following year, he was appointed a lecturer at his alma mater, the Department of History and Strategic Studies, University of Lagos, and has continued to rise through the ranks until his appointment on August 1st, 2020, as the head of the department. David Aworawo is a member of the Historical Society of Nigeria, British Scholar Society, and the Nigerian Society of International Affairs. Beyond academia, he has served and he continues to serve in different public capacities and is a consultant to many global organizations, including ECOWAS and the Friedrich Herbert Foundation. If you want to be part of this conversation, you can call us on 0700-1051-1051, or you can leave comments on WhatsApp on 090-991-64403, and on our social media accounts at City 1051 on Zoom, Twitter, and Facebook.
City Talks with Reuben Abati.
Back to City Talks with Reuben Abati here on City 1051 FM. And our guest is already with us, Professor David Aworawo. Thank you very much for joining us on this program this weekend. You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Abati.
Thank you very much. Well, Professor Aworawo, so much has been happening in the United States this week. President Trump spends his last week in office. By next week, Wednesday, there will be another president, 46th president of the United States, in the person of, by then, President Joseph R. Biden. But the lead up to all of this has been marked with a lot of controversy. The most momentous being the assault on Capitol Hill on January 6th, which was instigated by President Trump, who asked his supporters to march down Pennsylvania Avenue and try to prove their point strongly and with courage. And we all know the aftermath of that. President Trump has since been impeached, and he also stands the risk of being convicted as he goes to trial subsequently at the Senate. But what are the lessons, key lessons that we can draw from this? We usually refer to the United States as the strongest democracy in the world. But the strongest democracy in the last week looks like, in fact, it has its own weak points.
Yeah, there are many, many lessons to learn from the developments in the United States in the past 4 years, actually, but more importantly, in the past couple of weeks. Since the November the 3rd presidential election, we have seen the position that President Trump has taken. First, before the election, he made it very clear that the result will be accepted only if you won the election. In other words, the elections will be regarded as free and fair only if Trump won. Because basically that is undemocratic, because it is not one man's wish to win an election that confers legitimacy and freeness on the election. Rather, how the elections are conducted and whether the election reflects the results, the wishes of the people, the pattern of voting, the number of people who voted, whether the elections reflect that. That is what determines the freeness and fairness of an election, not whether the elections favor one candidate or not. So it has been, the issues have been developing, have been building up. They only came to a climax on that 6th of November when the Capitol was stormed. So there are many lessons to learn. First for the United States, and of course for the rest of the world.
Well, if you could help us unpack some of those lessons, since
First, that
we are interested also in democracy.
Yes, first that we should, people should be conscious of what they wish for. The trends that have been manifested in the past 4 years have been there actually for a quarter of a century. But in 2016, Americans thought, let them try something different, perhaps. That would transform their political system, political structure, and the country at large. But of course, as the years have gone on in the past 4 years, it has become very clear that it was a risky decision that many of them took to vote President Trump. And that was how things came to a head, in the aftermath of the November 3rd election. So the first lesson that should be learned is that in making political decisions, choices of people to vote for, the first issue to consider is what we call in politics, both domestic and international, as the idiosyncratic variable. You must consider the person. It is true that we talk about building strong institutions as a way of, ensuring that things work smoothly. But the activities, the developments in the United States in the past 4 years under President Trump has shown that even when you have the strongest of institutions, the idiosyncrasy of the man at the top is a critical factor on how a polity develops. That is the first lesson that the US should learn, and indeed the rest of the world. That in making a choice of who to vote for, look at the person's antecedents. Does the person have democratic values? Is the person committed to the common good or narrow interest? And several other factors that must be considered. Because in the 2016 election, Trump supporters, who are mainly right-wing, alone could not have made him win the election. The same way as they alone couldn't make him win the 2020 election. Moderates, independents, even some Democrats who thought, something dramatically different would take place in the United States if Trump won the election, actually made him win the election in 2016. So one important lesson for the United States, and indeed for the rest of the world, is that in making a choice of who to vote for in an election, you must consider the antecedents of the person and assess the values the person, stands for. That should be number one factor, especially in a structure of executive presidency, the kind that the United States, practices, and of course, the kind also that Nigeria practices. Because it is very clear from what has happened in the past 4 years that even when you have the strongest of institutions, the mien, the idiosyncrasy, the values of the person at the top is critical to the health and development of the state. Of course, there are numerous, other lessons to learn, and that we should not wait for it is too late before we stand up to, a dictator, so to speak. People have been praising, Mike Pence and several others who have, in the past couple of days, stood up, against Trump. But it is late. I do not see Pence as a hero as such, because if you follow the trend of things since November the 3rd, and even before then, you see that they stood with him, and that encouraged him, to move from one bad spot to another until things came to a head on the 6th of November. So there are several lessons to learn from what has happened. And of course, we should also learn to be humble. In 2004, 2006, I was in Harvard for a brief course, a brief seminar. And one thing we discussed for almost the entire period, Nigerian scholars, African scholars, British scholars, and others that were present, was the issue of American exceptionalism. The American scholars were always touting American exceptionalism, how America is different in its values, different in its history, different in political structure, and all that. And that we saw, that reflecting, some arrogance in the way they carry on, as if, oh, there is no one like us. There are certain things that can never happen here. But of course, I'm not sure many of them will be able to say that now in the aftermath of November 6th, riots, invasion of the Capitol, in the United States. So these are lessons that we should learn. Well, the good thing is that Americans have a way of, reinventing themselves. I'm sure they will be able to reinvent themselves in the aftermath of what has happened and forge ahead. But of course, there are numerous lessons for them to learn, and for the rest of the world, in attempts to strengthen our political system and political structures.
Well, I'm surprised that you say you are not so impressed with Vice President Mike Pence, because he seems to have stood firm, even in the face of President Trump pushing him to bend the Constitution to suit the will of the president and to subvert the decision of the Electoral College. And what we also know is that, as at this moment, is the only person who has reached out to the other side, and by placing a phone call to Kamala Harris, the vice president-elect. President Trump, on his part, has stubbornly refused to even invite the Bidens to the White House, or to even make a phone call to concede defeat. Pence also, stood very firm in the face of the assault against the Capitol. His life was at risk, and I thought a lot of people had commended him for the manner in which he had carried himself so far. But let's talk about Trump, who many describe as perhaps the most divisive president ever in the history of the United States. And people say they're not shocked that he's the first president to be impeached twice in the history of American presidency, the first president to lose the popular vote back to back. And the question is, what will be his legacy? What do you think will be his legacy given the last 4 years and the circumstances of his exit?
Well, I would like to start with commenting on some of the good, parts of Trump's presidency. Trump had the courage to do certain things that many before him, for political correctness, couldn't do. For instance, standing up to China. Of course, he went to the extreme eventually in the attempt to do that. And a couple of other things that, Trump focusing on the economy, and of course, focusing on the welfare of the people. All of that, even though in almost all of these examples, the cases I'm citing, it was always to the extreme. You cannot just say, oh, you only bother about Americans, you don't care about anybody else. The global community remains the global community. Having said that, the Trump legacy, Trump will be remembered for so many negative things. In fact, history may place him as the worst president ever in the United States. We have had presidents that, were perceived as not so competent, were perceived as weak, were perceived as probably not so knowledgeable, were perceived as not doing enough, to handle certain situations that presented themselves during their presidency. But for Trump, the way he has carried on, both in his activities within the United States and his interactions with the rest of the world, including America's allies in the past 4 years, is almost incomprehensible. In fact, there are people who cannot fathom, who cannot just comprehend, that what has happened in many of the things that happened in the United States in the past 4 years, whoever happened in the US. And so Trump's legacy is, if we are to summarize, is one that has too many negatives, very few positives. And, I dare say, moving forward, Trump will be remembered as a very bad president, if not the worst president in America's history.
Well, some pro-Trump commentators say that if anything, a man that got over 70 million votes in this last presidential election, and who has also demonstrated that he has a very strong base, the ultra-conservative, ultra-right base within the United States. And even that extends beyond the Christian evangelical community in the United States to places like Nigeria. I mean, I've seen quite a number of Trump fanatics here in Nigeria who up to this moment are still insisting that a miracle will happen before Wednesday, even when the evidence points to the contrary. Do you see Trumpism surviving in as strong a manner as it is at the moment beyond Trump's exit from office? Or it is something that is oxygenated by the fact that Trump had been in office and it was the one fueling the oxygen of ultra-conservatism. And when he leaves, perhaps we'll see a reduction in that kind of fanaticism that we witnessed on January 6th and on other occasions previously.
Well, Trumpism will not likely be fugacious. It will not be ephemeral. Trumpism has always been there. Trump only came to give life. He only came to lift it to a higher level, only came to give it prominence because of the position he has occupied in the past 4 years. So Trumpism will be there. Trumpism will not likely disappear with Trump. The only thing that will happen, which to my mind is an advantage to the United States, is that next Wednesday, after Trump leaves office, the oxygen, the fuel to the fire of, right-wing, politics and all, will go down tremendously. And so the threat that Trumpism has posed in the past 4 years will diminish after next Wednesday tremendously. But Trumpism will not disappear. It has always been there. It has been part of American history from the days of slavery, from the days of the struggle for racial equality and all that, which has continued on the present time. It will remain there. But after Wednesday, the fuel to the fire, the oxygen, the energy that Trumpism has had in the past 4 years, because of the position that Trump has occupied as the president of the United States, will make Trumpism less of a threat to the U.S. and, of course, also elsewhere moving forward. But one thing that is very clear is that Trumpism will not disappear after Trump leaves office next Wednesday.
Well, on account of President Trump's politics, the Republicans, they lost the 2 runoff elections in Georgia. And then we also saw on the floor of the House of Reps, 10 Republicans joining the Democrats to vote for the impeachment of President Trump. At the moment, the Grand Old Party, the GOP Republican Party, is divided right down the middle. What do you think could possibly be the future of the Republican Party in the United States beyond Trump?
Well, at present, the Republican Party is a party in crisis. And the crisis is reflective of the large number of people who have continued to support Trump and who have continued to believe, the things that Trump has said, in the past few years, even when there is no evidence, to back them up. One thing that the Trump presidency has brought to the fore is that the United States is not quite what some of us who are not in the US thought it was. We didn't know that America has such a large number of people who could be, influenced by demagoguery, and who are so extremely committed to, the right-wing position to the extent that they are even ready to sacrifice their lives for it. This we didn't know until we always knew they were there, but we didn't know the number was this large. You just spoke of the number, the amount of vote that Trump garnered. With all that's happened in the past 4 years, it is quite surprising that Trump still managed to gather, to secure up to 70 million, over 70 million votes. That is what should be, disturbing to the United States. But what should be gratifying, the other side to it, which people, are happy about, which will help the United States to reinvent itself moving forward, is the fact that there are many also, beyond that 35% or so, who will not listen to anything else other than what Trump is telling them and all that. Within the Republican Party itself, there are people who are reasonable, who are rational, who are moderate, and it is these ones that the hope of the party is now anchored on. The leaders of the party are hoping that more of these ones will be committed to trying to, reform the party such that they will be able to push the party away from the position it is now, extremely right-wing, dominated by right-wing and Trumpists, such that, moving forward, the party will be able to return to where it was, until very recently. So at the moment, the Republican Party is a party in crisis. But depending on what the leaders do, leaders will need to be able to take care of those extremists among them, the likes of Ted Cruz and the rest of them, who, despite overwhelming evidence, still continue to stand for what they cannot prove and hope that somehow Trump will still emerge president. If they're able to handle those ones, and they're able to get more and more people to, be more rational, more reasonable, more moderate in their political outlook, it is also possible that in the next couple of years, the Republican Party should be able to stabilize. But for now, it is a party in crisis, and the chances of winning election moving forward are very slim. A whole lot of things will need to change in the way the party is structured and organized for them to dream of winning, election moving forward.
Well, by the time the articles of impeachment go from the House of Reps to the Senate, President Biden will have been sworn in, and then Congress will be faced with attending to the business of government and also at the same time having to clear the backlog of the trial of the former, then, as he would then be, former President Trump. Do you think that this is likely to affect the momentum of the Biden administration, particularly in the first few months, but especially against the background of the fact that President Biden wants to hit the ground running? He has announced an American rescue plan of about 1.9 trillion to address housing issues, to address unemployment, to provide stimulus package of about $1,400 for families, American families, and also to ensure that $20 billion is devoted to fast-tracking the COVID-19 response. But then you have Congress bogged down with the trial of former President Trump, as he would then be. An effect, do you think all of that will have on the Biden presidency?
Well, it will affect the early days or early weeks of the Biden presidency negatively. Actually, there are two schools of thought on this impeachment thing. There's a school of thought that argues that the crisis of November 6th haven't been taken care of. The security in Washington, D.C. and around the Capitol haven't been strengthened. And the threats that Trump poses to the polity haven't been reduced drastically. Trump should have just been allowed to disappear to where he came from. That is one school of thought. The other school of thought is that which argues that if the lawmakers do nothing, then they will be setting a very bad precedent, such that another power-drunk president will come sometimes in future and think that it can cause the kind of disruption that was caused on November the 6th without catastrophic consequences.
January the 6th?
January the 6th, 2021, without catastrophic consequences. And so that the U.S., with their positive tradition of legal system, that is legal positivism, the law must take its course. That the offense Trump committed is an impeachable one, and the impeachment process will proceed to a logical conclusion. If not for anything, one, to serve as a deterrent to future dictators, and second, in line with what the law provides for. And so they argue that they will pursue the case to a logical conclusion. But one thing that is very clear is that the impeachment process will affect the smooth running and the performance of the Biden presidency, the early days, early weeks, negatively. It now depends on how quickly they get done with the business. I personally do not see them securing the number of votes needed to carry the impeachment to a logical conclusion. 67. I mean, getting close to 20.
They will need 17 Republicans.
Republican senators to join the Democrats is a tall order. So my own suggestion to them would be that they should get done with the process, if only for the symbolism they want to achieve with it. They should get done with it in just a few days, so that Biden can be focused on his agenda of tackling the numerous problems that face the United States right now.
City Talks with Reuben Abati.
If you are just joining us, it's City Talks with Reuben Abati on City 1051 FM. And our guest this Saturday is Professor David Aworawo, the head of the Department of History and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos and a professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies. And he's been helping us to look at the assault on Capitol Hill in the United States, the impeachment of President Trump, the aftermath, and issues in American politics, and lessons that we can learn from that. Professor Aworawo, thank you very much for staying with us. Well, I'm already receiving questions from some of our listeners, and here Yemi Adeogun from the United Kingdom is asking via WhatsApp. He says, what's your opinion about the racial divisions and tension that the Trump presidency has already created? Are we going to see America going through a healing process? And then secondly, what lessons can Nigeria learn about the presidential system, given what we have seen in the United States? A situation whereby a man gets impeached in the House of Reps, but he may not be convicted because his party, up to a point, controls the Senate, and the balance there probably favors him. Well, now the Democrats control the Senate. If you add Kamala Harris to the 50 that they have in the Senate. Your response?
Racial division has become intensified in the past 4 years because of some of the policies and actions of President Trump. Um, that fact is indisputable. Um, since the election on November the 3rd, and since Biden was declared president-elect, the actions he has taken and the appointments he has made, give hope that the racial division that has taken place, has widened in the past 4 years, will be quickly addressed as the Biden presidency becomes inaugurated next Wednesday. The appointments are broad-based, races, different class, races, color. It's something quite different from, what we have experienced in the past 4 years. Apart from the appointments, in addition to the comments the president has made, in fact, the president-elect has made, and even the actions leading up to the election, the way he has interacted with people freely across races and all, give hope that the Biden presidency will be one that addresses the question of multiracial interaction, integration, respect for the races, equality, and all that. We should just be hopeful that Biden is able to continue in the way he has started before the election and after the election. If he continues in the same routine, racial division that has widened in the past 4 years will be addressed as the Biden presidency comes on board, from next Wednesday. Then the other question regarding what lessons to learn. For a long time, we have identified and explained the deficiencies of the presidential system. The presidential system is such that even though the separation of powers is embedded in the whole structure, since it's a democratic structure, it has a lot of elements that encourage authoritarianism, absolutism, despite the fact that it is a government that is supposed to be anchored on democracy. The powers that the man at the helm of affairs, the president, wields, is just so extensive, which was why I began by talking about the idiosyncratic variable, the character, the mien, the idiosyncrasy of the man at the top. It is so crucial because of the nature of the presidential system. And there are variants too. In the United States, the structure is a little different from the one we have here. For instance, the vice president is the president of Senate there. In Nigeria, it isn't, which further even compounds the American system. My take is that the presidential system has contradictions, and the American presidential system is even more complicated, and it needs reforms. For instance, after a man wins an election, why does the process have to go through several stages up to what we witnessed on the 6th of January? Too many stages are involved even after a man wins an election before he is now pronounced the president-elect. So those are the issues. And for us here in Nigeria, who also practice the system, if you ask me, my take is that we should return to the British model of parliamentary democracy. The man at the center, the president, does not enjoy so extensive, amount of power as is conferred on him by the presidential system. Another contradiction revolves around the processes of getting elected. It's so complicated. The man has to appease everybody on earth to be able to secure votes. He has to look for so much money to be able to win the election. By the time he commits himself to so many people, so many forces, so many groups, by the time he emerges, he's already compromised. And so the American system is complicated, and I won't recommend it for us in Nigeria, even though that's what we practice. And the American variant is even more complicated. And if you ask me, my position is that it needs extensive reforms.
Okay, but if you don't recommend the presidential system of government, will you agree with persons who say that perhaps Nigeria should go back to the parliamentary system, which is
Absolutely.
more representative.
Absolutely. I think it's far better. The contradictions of the political system are too multifaceted, multidimensional, that we will be better off with the although who we are is also a major factor, but the structure itself, how it is designed, is also a factor. So I think we should go back to the parliamentary. It's better for us than this executive presidency that we are practicing.
Well, Professor Aworawo, you talked about the diversity of the Biden-Harris team that we have seen. And I guess for many Nigerians, there's been some excitement that some Nigerian names have been mentioned as part of that team. First, it was Wale Adeyemo, who was named Deputy Treasury Secretary. And then later, it was Osareme Okolo, who was named COVID-19 Policy Advisor as part of that Biden team. And then most recently, Fumi Olorunnipa Badejo, who was named Associate Counsel, part of the 21-man team in the White House Counsel's Office, the legal team of the Biden presidency. Well, what's your take on that? Should Nigerians be really excited about this, or these are, in a real sense, Americans who just happen to have Nigerian DNA?
Well, we should be happy if a country that was called shithole not long ago is having its its people appointed, even though they're also Americans, appointed to important positions in the new government. That's a cause for happiness, really. Although, as it has always been in cases like this, in all of these issues, America's gain is Nigeria's loss. There is a brain drain dimension. But the other question people have asked is that if they were in Nigeria, would they have been would they have risen the way they have? So, but taking together, I think we should be happy, if not for anything, for psychological satisfaction. If we're called Shito just not long ago, and just shortly after that, many Nigerians are to feature prominently in the new government, I think that should make us happy. Of course, when issues affecting Africa also come up, I'm not sure they will take a position that will be anti-Africa. So they are being there, if not for anything, is to Nigeria's advantage, is to Africa's advantage. So I think it's something we should be happy about.
Well, Professor Aworawo, I saw a comment on the screen there from Foluke Ademokun. She was saying we should be happy only if we invested in them. We have quite a number of people who are joining us via Zoom. I can see Damian Ajayi, Foluke Ademokun, Lanre Abati, Monsurat Taiwo, Noah Ishola, Oluseya Rowolo, Samuel Chukuka, Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi. Well, thank you all for joining us. I see also a Bosse O there, and Adeoye Obanlewo, and many others who are, on the screen there joining us. We'll throw the lines open now for comments, for questions from some of our listeners who have been with us. If you want to be part of this conversation, you can call us on 0700-1051-1051. Somebody's on the line. Your name, your location, and then your comment on or question for Professor Aworawo. Hello? Hello?
Hello, good afternoon, Dr. Reuben Abati.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
It's Eddie from Songo.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to ask my beloved brother there that what has happened now to Tom being impeached by the Speaker, by the House of Representatives? Do you think such a thing will have happened here? And why is it that our National Assembly members are not doing the needful? Because we can even see a lot of injustice or character. I mean, look at the federal character principles that the president are still doing. They're putting here and there, and yet they are sitting down, they're doing nothing, not even checkmating the president. So why is it not happening here? That's my question. God bless Nigeria in Jesus' name.
Well, Professor Aworawo, you got that? He's asking.
I didn't quite hear him clearly.
Yeah, there was a lot of echo, but he was asking
Yeah.
basically that what happened in the U.S. House of Representatives. Can such a thing ever happen in Nigeria here, where you have lawmakers coming together impeaching the president of the country and not having a situation where the whole thing will degenerate to talks about federal character and all that? That's his concern.
Well, I think we can. As more and more of our political leaders and political actors are becoming imbibing the values of democracy. I think if such a thing happens in Nigeria, we will have people who will walk across party lines. How many there will be, one cannot tell. Of course, in the United States, we only have 10 that supported impeachment from the Republican, lawmakers. So I think you recall that there was a time that our own Senate too was invaded, and the maize was stolen. The condemnation was bipartisan. Some people did it belong to a particular party, but the condemnation cut across. There was this solidarity. It is true that our tendency to look at everything from the prism of region, whether it is north or south, east or west, and the ethnic group and all that, is stronger here. But it is possible. I mean, it has happened before. When the maize was stolen at that time, people from across party lines condemned it. I'm not sure if an impeachment was to have been conducted for someone along that line, what things would have turned out to be. But certainly, there were people who walk across party lines and support the ideal and not necessarily the party's position.
Lines are still open and we'll take more calls, but quickly, let's take another commercial break and we'll be right back.
City Talks with Reuben Abati.
Welcome back. You are still listening to City Talks with Reuben Abati, and our guest is still Professor David Aworawo. Before we went on break, we were saying that our lines are open, and I thought I saw someone on Zoom who wanted to ask a question. If you still have your question, I'm waiting for it. I'm checking the screen. But if there is any other caller on the line, the lines are open, and Professor Aworawo is here to answer your questions. Yes, someone is on the line.
All right, Doc.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Doc.
Oh, okay. Dr. Biodun Adeniyi. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Doc, and thank you very much, Prof. For the penetrating insights you have provided. My questions are somewhat straightforward. I like your concept of idiosyncratic variable. But I just want to know from you, sir, if you think that this kind of variable exists in a vacuum. Is it not possible for us to situate it within the context of some kind of biology or some kind of medicine? Which is to say that is it not possible for there to be some kind of advocacy, or some kind of campaign for political party processes to be concerned about medical checkups, to sieve out individuals with some die-harded destructive idiosyncrasies, because much as we all look decent, there are still some idiosyncrasies that can be very, very damaging for democratic processes. And of course, it has taken a sophisticated democracy like that of the United States for us to realize it in the last 4 years, as the case could be. What do you think about this, Prof? Taking it away just from the ordinary understanding of idiosyncratic variable, to the question of biology. And secondly, sir, I want to believe as well that, yes, we think that America is not a perfect democracy, but there's also a sense in saying that there's a strength in the ability to withstand a character as strong as Donald Trump. And I imagine that if Donald Trump had existed in a weaker democracy where institutions are not as strong as we saw in America, of course, Donald Trump will have perfectly had his way. But I think it is still advantage America, it is still advantage democratic America, that despite its vociferous machinations, they were still able to withstand him, and America, they were able to steady their gates once again. So I think that they still deserve some level of commendation in this regard, and I want to know your thoughts in this area. And Prof, finally, sir, I agree with your comments on diasporic Nigerians who are in America. Yeah, so largely, many people don't know. They probably just remember Nigeria as a place of psychological connection, as a place for imagination. But in terms of physical existence, they are completely off our side. Consistent with the thinking that home is not a matter for subjective construction. And finally, I am surprised, Prof, that you are surprised that Americans can behave like the normal crowd. Because a crowd, no matter how sophisticated, are usually characterized, with some certain things. They are usually feeble-minded, fickle-minded, and that's why you see elegant legislators who are supposed to be exposed. You still see them behaving like kids all over the world. So any system really just need a demagogue, to trigger them, and that's why the question of control and regulation, is also very, very important. And finally, again, it is still to the credit of the United States that they are able to rise above the evil deeds of the protesters who marched on Capitol Hill, to bring back their gates, and they are progressing again once more, as we're going to see next week. Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Adeniyi. I'm sure Professor Aworawo has been following all those handful of questions. Professor Aworawo,
Sure.
over to you.
Well, the first has to do with medical tests. Yes, that is important to determine the true state of health of the person, including mental health. It's important. I agree with you entirely that in making a choice of candidates of political parties, this should be a major consideration. The physical health, the mental health of whoever they want to present to represent their parties, and of course, who might then occupy important positions, in the country. But beyond that, there is the social and cultural issues. How the person has developed over time, what the person has been saying, the values the person has been committed to, the groups to which the person has belonged. All of that help to establish, the dynamics of what I, referred to earlier as the idiosyncratic variable. Who is he? What are his men? What group does he belong to? What are the values he subscribes to? All of that, The second question regarding the institutions of the United States, yes, it is. I mean, without such strong institutions, the damage would have been a lot, more intense and more extensive. So I agree with you entirely that strengthening institutions is a major way of ensuring stable political systems. And back home here, these are things we need to focus on more, to strengthen institutions such that if some persons with propensity for abuse of power emerges, the negative impacts will be stemmed by, the institutions, the strong institutions. They certainly helped in, mitigating the negative impact of Trumpism in the past 4 years, and of course in the last couple of days. Diaspora, yes, but there are people, whether we like it or not. They may not be physically here, they are people, and I'm sure you are, familiar with diasporic remittances, which have been regarded as crucial to our economic development. So there are people, and whatever happens to them, even those are not Nigerians, as long as they are blacks. Our foreign policy tracks, Africa is the centerpiece, people of African descent. So we have sentimental attachment to people of black color, whether they are even Nigerians or not. And when they are Nigerians, we're even more interested, so all of that. And of course, finally, the Americans need to be commended. When I said I was surprised about, some of the things that have developed, come to the fore in the past 4 years, not so much that I didn't know they existed. It is the scale. In every society, you have all these extremists, you have these bad people. But I never knew the percentage number was that large. It's the largeness of number, that has surprised me. And of course, that's something Americans have to, I don't know how they work on it, because the more of moderate people they have, the better their political system will likely be.
Okay, thank you very much there. Well, that's someone on Twitter here. He says, are we not supposed to shine light on the Uganda elections? Are we not showing care for our fellow Africans? Must we focus our energy on discussing American elections for almost 1 month now? Well, Prof, do you want to respond to that? The elections in Uganda, a lot of violence there, a lot of repression. Yoweri Museveni has been in power for more than 36 years. He's 76 and he's seeking a sixth term in office. He got into office a year before Bobby Wine, the leading contender, was born. And now Bobby Wine wants to be president. 10 others are contesting the presidency with him, including a woman. But President Yoweri Museveni is determined to sit tight. He says he's a symbol of stability. Quickly, but just by way of responding to this particular person, maybe, Prof, you'd like to comment on sit-tightism in Uganda.
Yes. Fortunately, if the person who sent the question has been listening carefully, he will have seen that each time we comment on the United States, we also talk about lessons for Nigeria and lessons for Africa. So by discussing the United States situation, it's not in isolation. We are not oblivious of the African condition. Caesarism, as we call it in African politics, is a matter of concern. The likes of Museveni is there, in Equatorial Guinea, Nguema Basogo is there, in Cameroon, we still have them all over the place. Even most recently, Alassane Ouattara that was supposed to have 2 terms somehow, despite all the sympathies for him a couple of years ago when he came into office. He has managed to get the 3rd term. In Guinea the other day, an 80-year-old person wants to another term. So it's a matter, it's very concerning. And these are issues we have been advocating that the AU should take a more firm position on this. The AU has provision for at least stepping in when these kind of things happen, unlike what the structures were when the OAU was in place. It's concerning. I agree totally with the person who asked the question that it is very concerning and it's something that we must pay attention to as Africans. Statism, if it is not addressed, will continue to be a ball, will continue to draw us back. We'll continue to lead to arrested development. I always say that Aristotle once said that the stability of all regimes is corrupted by the corrosive power of time. The longer the man stays, the less effective he becomes. So it is very concerning, and it's an issue that all of us Africans must focus on, must advocate against, to ensure that Africa is able to practice democracy the way it is practiced in other parts of the world, and in accordance with, the provisions, the values, that underlie a democratic structure.
Well, at this point, I will have to thank you very much, Professor David Aworawo, for your time, for taking time out to join us on this program, and for your insights and your contributions. We thank you very much indeed. We also like to thank all our callers and those who reach out to us on Zoom, Twitter, Facebook, and WhatsApp. Remember, the conversation does not end here. You can still reach out to me on my social media account at Abati1990, both on Instagram and Twitter, and City1051 at City1051, and on all social media platforms. Now, for those of you who tuned in late, no need to worry. You can visit our YouTube page, City1051, to watch the entire show. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And don't forget also to tune in next week at noon for another exciting edition of City Talks. My name is Reuben Abati. The show was produced by Adedoja Allen, Abiodun Odunton, Ayodamola Oludara, Oluwaseun Adetitun, and Olanrewaju Onipede Jr. Thank you all for participating.
City Talks with Reuben Abati.